Hello, and welcome to this lecture on the Catholic Reformation. This was the Catholic response to the Reformation, and they're going to maybe make some changes or see what they can do to stop the Lutherans, the Calvinists, the Anglicans, the Anabaptists, and all the other Protestants from leaving the Catholic Church and see what they can do. You may be surprised by what you learn, you may not. Let's see though, like what the Catholics felt that was the best way to really win people back and to stop this, because just going to war with the Protestants was not working. Charles V, founded that, and these Protestant religions were spreading like wildfire throughout Europe. So let's figure out and see what the Catholic Church had to say. This name itself is there's a debate around this. Sometimes it's called the Counter Reformation, but more so recently, it's called the Catholic Reformation, just to kind of show you how the church might have changed. Because the old idea is that the Catholic Church tried to stop the Reformation by doing these things. Now the idea is that they try to change their ways to win people back. It kind of doesn't really make any sense. To me, at least, why they use one form or the other, because I'm gonna teach you the same thing. But just I guess I'm just telling you that, I guess, just in case you see either this or the Counter Reformation, just know it's pretty much the same thing. Again, just another map of Europe. Again, overwhelmingly, most of Europe is still Catholic. However, you still have Calvinist hotspots. You have the Anglican hotspot. You have Lutheran spots across Europe, with, of course, Islam and Eastern Orthodox religion widespread in the South and in Africa and in Eastern Europe. But we do see, again, just by more and more by the day, people leaving the Catholic Church, which is a wake-up call to the Catholic Church. So what do? In the 1530s, we see one pope who wants to make a change to an extent. Pope Paul III. He is a Renaissance pope. He was a fan of some humanist ideas, which, again, humanism and the Renaissance, they are not anti-Catholic or anti-church. I can't stress that enough. However, we do see some pushback towards Pope Paul III. He does start a commission that leads to the Council of Trent, which is a council by the Catholic Church that was meant to reform the church and hopefully create some things that were going to make the church stronger and better, and more proud of being Catholic. Maybe get rid of some of these corruption issues and maybe solidify some of the things that are wrong with the church in the eyes of many of the Protestants. The big takeaway from the Council of Trent, and we do see the Jesuits created. The Jesuits are kind of an answer to the claim that the church is incompetent, corrupt, and uneducated. The Jesuits are going to be highly educated Christian warriors, in a sense, that are really going to push out and fight for Catholicism. Not necessarily with their hands, but by going out into the world, doing missionary work, and getting really tied into countries and governments around the globe. Remember, Spain and Portugal are the major Catholic powers that have these global access points. Whether it's the Spanish colonial empire or the Portuguese trading ports, we're going to see them give access to these Jesuits. And these Jesuits are going to go out into the world, get really tied in with foreign governments, and really push these governments to be pro-Catholic Church, and even sometimes spy for the Catholic Church. They acted as spies in some places. They get kicked out of places in Asia, and China and Japan, I believe, for being viewed as spies, and rightfully so by the governments that existed over there. However, this council and these changes that we do see from Paul III are very minor, and they're even stopped by successive popes. Cardinal Carafa, who became Pope Paul IV in 1555, the same year as the Peace of Augsburg, which was a disaster for the Catholic Church, right? His realm, his religion, and the Holy Roman Empire. These pretty much stop any types of reform that were going on in the Catholic Church. We see the church begin to censor authors, Protestant authors, Northern Renaissance authors like Erasmus, and we see the Inquisition continue. And this is the same Inquisition that will eventually get Galileo in a few years, in a few decades. So, just looking at this Council of Trent again, Trent is a city between Germany and Italy. Germany, where there's still some Catholic followers, but it's also the site of the Holy Roman Empire, where all these Lutherans are springing up. We see them meet for a number of years, almost 20 years, but nothing really changes or happens, because again, we do see the conservative pro-Catholic, anti-Protestant line of thinking went out in the council and within the church. So what did they change? The big takeaway is that the priests need better training, more education. That's why the Jesuits kind of become the star players of the Catholic Church after this period. More celebration of saints and mystical ideas. Mysticism in the Catholic Church previously been viewed as like maybe you're possessed by a spirit or maybe you're a witch or something like that, particularly if you're a woman. And most mystics were women, because they had mystical experiences or things like that. So instead of maybe being executed or burnt to the stake, you'd be celebrated now because you had a really close connection with God. And then finally, their best answer is better art. We need better art to win the people over, win the masses over, win the leaders of Europe over, because they're going to be the ones seeing this art. And if people see this art, if more people see this art, particularly the well-to-do people of Europe, they're going to be less likely to allow these peasants to kind of be swayed by Lutheranism or by Calvinism or whatever. One last thing they do, which you can argue if that's a change, is they made a more unified church model of leadership with the Pope in charge, but that pretty much already existed. In fact, if we kind of jump forward a bit, here's pretty much all of the changes we're going to see. Here's what the church looked like prior to the Reformation. Here's what it looked like after the Reformation. I did you the service of underlining the changes and things that were added. We see some new orders and some new celebration of mystics, which I'll talk about in a second. More training for priests. They say there's no corruption, but who's to say? There's new orders, again, which I already said, like the Jesuits, which we'll talk about in a second. And then better, more provocative art that will win more people over. The Protestants at this time, in places like the Netherlands, Holy Roman Empire, they were destroying Catholic, cathedrals and churches that had stained glass and beautiful art and statues, because they felt it was, doing a service to God. Who are we to, celebrate these people and these statues and these artists when that's not what the Bible says? We need to go back to the Bible, work hard, do what we need to do, and become better servants of God. We don't need to be celebrating art. So we're going to see iconoclasm, which is destruction of religious art, particularly Catholic art across Europe. The Catholic Church pushes back against that and pushes out wave after wave and sponsors artist after artist to kind of celebrate these biblical stories and art in general. New orders we were going to see really pop up across Europe. These orders were meant to really get out there and really do missionary work and get people to convert to the Catholic Church, but also they're meant to celebrate mystics and people who have extremely positive views of the Catholic Church. It's not enough to just celebrate the everyday person and kind of appeal to those average peasants or whoever. We need to celebrate those people who have extremely positive views of the Catholic Church, push those people out there, because they're going to be your best warriors on the religious battlefield, whether it's in the actual battlefield or in the minds of people. You're going to need to get those people out there and get them to convert, and make sure that, if we're losing some people to Lutheranism or to Calvinism in Europe, that we're gaining other Catholics outside in other parts of the world. Hopefully within Europe too, but in America or Asia or Africa or wherever. So who are some of these people? The biggest group you need to know for sure are the Jesuits. The Jesuits, or the Society of Jesus, becomes a gigantic order formed by Ignatius of Loyola. He viewed himself as a soldier of God. He wrote a book called The Spiritual Exercises, which was a manual, almost like a training manual on how to become a better, more devout Catholic, almost like you're doing spiritual mental exercises, saying how to become a better servant of God, what you must do. And it's not like, you're going through a physical workout, but it kind of felt like that in some of their minds, that, they're doing all these spiritual exercises and studies in order to become better people who can serve God and spread the word of God better. The Jesuits are going to be super supportive of education, which is a change of pace for the Catholic Church. If you remember, there were many priests who could not read or couldn't read Latin or were uneducated. and this created a sense of corruption and distrust within the Catholic Church across Europe. That goes away. That starts to go away. Priests, and particularly the Jesuits, are going to start to be viewed with a more through a more educated lens in this period, because they're going to be so focused on education and really knowing what's in the Bible, what God said in those books and things like that, and spreading those words to the people of the world. Another notable Jesuit is Francis Xavier. Xavier University, St. X, named after him. They're Jesuit schools. He was really supportive of going out into the world and spreading not just Catholic ideology, but Jesuit ideology throughout the world, and connecting Christianity to local beliefs to help, again, win over converts across the world. And again, this aligns with the age of exploration. Spain, Portugal being big, colonizers of either empires like in Spain or trading posts like in Portugal. They're going to really be promotive of this idea that you need to go out there, win people's hearts and minds with your educated beliefs, and do good works too while you're out there. That becomes a really foundational belief of Jesuit practices in schools and things like that. Xavier High School, Xavier University are both big on that social justice idea. The Jesuits are going to be big movers and shakers in the world of missionary work, but also in the foreign diplomacy world. They're going to go out there and they're going to become advisors and diplomats of the Catholic Church, and again, waging this PR battle to make the Catholic Church look better. So they're going to be incredibly important. Other people and groups who are celebrated are listed over here. To be fair, I don't see them come up too much, but these groups become celebrated in this period as well because of their devout beliefs in the Catholic Church. They all are kind of similar to the Jesuits in a sense, and they kind of do believe on social justice and helping people and doing missionary work. One exception is Teresa of Avila. She was a nun who had a mystical experience, and instead of ignoring her or maybe calling her a witch or something like that, she was celebrated. A very famous statue of hers was created, and she had a mystical experience with God, in which she felt that like an angel of God pierced her heart with an angel with a ray of love, of God's love, and you kind of see that experience down here. And I believe we have that art here. You can kind of just see the detail in this piece of art, which I'll talk about in a second. But she is celebrated in this period of Catholic Reformation as well for her divine, important connection to God that she had, which again previously would have been ignored or attacked. Now it's celebrated by the Catholic Church as an importance of their religion, important part of their religion. So, like I said, one of the main ways that the Catholic Church really focused on winning people back or trying to convert new people to the Catholic Church was through art. So I just want to briefly talk about two artistic movements that were impactful. One, the first movement is Mannerism. It's kind of an extension of the Renaissance to an extent. Mannerism is sometimes hard to pin down, but basically when you see people having extended, elongated limbs, exaggerated emotions, almost like alien-like proportions in their body, there's a pretty good chance that's a Mannerist piece. And again, this is in the mid to late 1500s. The most famous Mannerist is El Greco. With his painting here, Laocoon. Laocoon was a Trojan priest who, if you know the story of the Trojan War, Troy was being invaded by the Greeks. But Laocoon, this Trojan priest, he foretold the people of Troy not to let in a Trojan horse. They could secretly contain a ton of Greek soldiers. Keep the gate closed. Don't let in the Trojan horse. This angered the Greek gods. Some say it was Poseidon, but I think the story is that it was Athena. Athena sent some sea snakes to rise up and attack Laocoon and his sons, killing all three of them to stop them from, letting in the Trojan horse, which could be pictured here. But here in this piece, you see elongated, almost a natural alien-looking like bodies, stretched out. Sometimes these bodies appear to be flame-like, because that's how like disproportionate and alien-like they look. But yeah, this is Laocoon by El Greco, who's a Greek artist living in Spain. So he's called El Greco because that's Spanish, but he's Greek. If you ever see him, he's probably the most famous Mannerist. So if you see him, El Greco, just know he's Mannerist. Another one is over here. This is a Polish artist, Joachim Wetwal, Perseus and Andromeda in 1616. Getting into Baroque a little bit, getting into the sign of the times a bit. This one is also considered Mannerist, with Andromeda's long proportions here. You also, interestingly enough, see, now that we're in the 1600s, now a lot more Asian influences are present in this piece, like this Asian inspired dragon over here. So that's a kind of an interesting point there. But again, you're seeing extended bodies. You know, I would say Andromeda here has a more natural looking body, but just extended limbs and body parts and things like that to an extent. So that's Mannerism in a nutshell. It has the manner of the Renaissance, is an imitation of the Renaissance, but it's not quite Renaissance. But I do want to get into Baroque art next. Baroque art really is the art of the Catholic Reformation. This is the art that the Catholic Church tried to push out and use to win back the hearts and the minds of Europe and the world with their intense sculptures and paintings and other forms of art. This combined Renaissance with spiritual revival, and with that spiritual revival becomes deep emotion, contrast, that shading, that intense shading that we started to see in some of the Renaissance pieces. That's more so in Baroque art. Baroque art is supposed to be more of like a snapshot in like live action, rather than like a staged portrait that we would find in Renaissance. We want to see what's going on, the emotion, the intensity, the action that's going on with the drama. Again, there's no movies, there's no TV show, there's nothing that's moving. So if you could create art that looked like it was moving more so, that's going to win more people and get more people to really engage with your art. This was encouraged by the Catholic Church after the Council of Trent and during the Council of Trent for the 20 years that it existed. So they're going to really support these sculptures, this architecture, and these paintings to, again, try to win back the hearts and the minds of the people of Europe. Well, it starts in Italy, it ends in France. We're going to see the Catholic Church and churches in general get less and less important in, controlling the politics of Europe. We're going to see these absolute monarchs that are going to spring up. Louis XIV, for example, they're going to really take Baroque art and make it theirs. So while it starts as a religious form of art that's really supportive of the Catholic Church and, anti-Reformation, we're going to see the monarchs of Europe really adopt Baroque art and say, God was great back then, back in the Middle Ages, but now we're in the early modern European age, and now it's time to celebrate the true leaders of Europe, the absolute monarchs, like King Louis and his ilk. So here's just some examples of Baroque art that kind of shows you this transformation to an extent. Here again is the statue of Saint Teresa you can see in Rome. Again, it looks like she's in the middle of a religious moment of ecstasy, an extreme love, extreme pleasure here, with the angel of God piercing her heart and making her feel all of God's love all at once. But as time goes on, we're going to see monarchs really take hold of Baroque art. And we'll talk about these pieces and these people later on. But even like Versailles, if you've ever been to Versailles outside of Paris, where all these French kings lived up until the French Revolution, that is a Baroque building with lots of Baroque art on the inside. So again, Baroque art is going to start with being super supportive of the Catholic Church, and while it will continue to be supportive of the Catholic Church, it will also be supportive of the new gods of Europe, the absolute monarchs, who were God's will on earth, as we will talk about. Here we see the city of the Vatican City today. Back then, again, there was no Vatican City; it was all Rome. But here you can see some Baroque architecture, statues caught in mid-pose, adoring the crowd. This architecture, again, is supposed to make you feel like you're maybe entering this super important place where God has complete control over everything. And that's really what the Vatican wanted. They wanted people to feel God's glory, the glory of the Catholic Church, and all of the things that it's done over the years. So the architecture inside the Vatican and on the streets of the Vatican, super inspired by the Baroque art movement. So here you can see two pieces. Here, of course, is a statue of David over here. Here is a Baroque statue of David by Bernini, a Baroque artist, a Baroque sculptor. Here you can see the difference between the two. Again, David looks like the Renaissance David by Michelangelo looks like he's posing, getting his sculpture taken with the contrapposto pose, very natural, lifelike pose. Here we see David in the middle of his attack on the giant against Goliath. He's like in the middle of throwing his sling at David, ready to strike a blow, and you can kind of see him here getting ready to get him. So again, notice the emotion, notice the facial expression, notice the body position, that he's like, we got a snapshot of him, like we're taking a picture of him as he's about to kill David. He's not posing for a photo like he is over here. He's getting ready to attack and to fight the Goliath, to fight Goliath the giant. So another thing too is you can kind of get a better 3D view of some of these Baroque sculptures or paintings, notably the sculptures. You kind of can see like a twirling motion in a lot of these sculptures. Here, if you were to walk around this statue, which is in Rome as well, just like the Vatican's is in Rome, you can kind of see again him twirling and get like an interestingly 360 view of him, like in this moment of action and intensity. Another sculpture, this is the rape of Proserpina or Persephone. This is Hades, god of the underworld, or Pluto, the god of the underworld, kidnapping the daughter of Demeter. Here again, a moment of action, a moment of emotional intensity. She's in anguish. He's pretty excited that he's about to get a new wife. And I just like to point out the detail, the intense detail, where you can see like him forcefully grabbing on her thigh and making an impression there. That's pretty intense sculpture that was done there. I saw this in person in Rome at the Borghese Gallery, and it's a really intense thing to see in person. But you see, again, the emotion, the variety of emotions, the 360 view. Again, it's like we got a snapshot in time of Hades doing this kidnapping. And again, just a moment of emotion and intensity in the sculpture. Looking at paintings, you see similar themes. While you can't get a really good 360 twirl view that you would see like in those last two statues that I showed you, you see here a comparison. And in this story, it's the same story, same idea. You see a woman, Judith, who is from the Old Testament. This story is important to Jewish religion and the Christian religion. And you see Judith here, as her town is being invaded by an enemy. She goes and sneaks her way into the leader's tent and decapitates him and claims his head for her own, to show her tribe, to show her people that she successfully literally decapitated the head of the enemy and perhaps saved her people from this awful war that could happen. So that's the story of Judith in a nutshell. Here you see the Renaissance version of it, printed around the year 1500. Again, it looks like it's a posed photo, not a lot of emotion, not a lot of intensity. Here you see, the opposite. Same story, same beheading story. You see his anguish as he's getting his head cut off. You see Judith and her assistant, her maid helper, holding down the body forcefully as he's struggling to survive, struggling to prevent the blade from cutting off his head. And she looks very determined and proud of what she's doing. One thing you notice in Baroque paintings, too, is that there's a huge contrast in shade between light and dark, that there's like a spotlight shining on some of these subjects. That's the chiaroscuro, probably said that wrong, but that shading of extreme light and extreme shading, that's much more pronounced in Baroque art than it was in Renaissance art. And it's like a spotlight shining on the action, on the intensity, on the main subject, on the main focus of the painting. So you see that here as well in painting. So again, it's a snapshot in time, extreme emotion, extreme intensity. You do see contorted body positions in paintings as well, kind of like what you would see in Mannerism, but maybe not as extreme as Mannerism. And then you also see that spotlight shading, where you kind of see the drama and the emotions highlighted by that spotlight. Here, you again see two example of Baroque pieces. Again, notice the emotion, the anguish on Holofernes' face. You see Judith, determined here, but still kind of hesitant. Here, she's a little bit more determined to murder her enemy. We'll talk about why this is the case in class. It's a really interesting true life story. But we'll, again, two Baroque pieces here. Notice the similarities. Shading, drama, emotion, intensity, and things like that. All right, we're going to do a quick game here to wrap up this lecture. You have two pieces here. Which piece is Baroque? Is it A or is it B? The thing with this game is that each set of paintings are going to be with the same subjects. So same subjects, same characters in the painting, but which one is Baroque, which one is Renaissance? I'll give you a second to guess. If you guessed A, you are correct. This is another Judith and Holofernes painting where the enemy gets his head cut off. Right next, this is, I believe, Aphrodite and Cupid. And I believe maybe Hermes. This is Hermes or someone else. I'm not quite sure who this is over here. But the mother is Aphrodite and the child is Cupid. So which one is Baroque? Which one is Renaissance? I'll give you a second to guess. If you guessed A being the more better Baroque example, you are again correct. All right, last but not least, this is actually not the same subject. This is called The Girl with the Unicorn, and this is the famous girl with the pearl earring out of the Netherlands. Which one is Renaissance? Which one is Baroque? Again, if you guessed B, sorry, didn't mean to say again, but if you said B is Baroque, you are correct. Notice the more appearance of emotions. Notice the shading, the focus, the contrast between light and dark, the focus on her face. And again, you can get some Mona Lisa vibes here. This is actually an example of Dutch Baroque. We'll talk more about the Dutch next unit, in Unit 3, and their work. But this is the better Baroque option here. All right, so that's the Catholic Reformation and some art to go along with it. We'll continue going through this Reformation unit, and I'll see you next time.